My name is Sarah Douglas. For my final project, I'm going to be doing a museum critique. I went to the California Museum in downtown Sacramento. So the California Museum was founded in 1998 and it showcases the California State Archives collection. So that's accumulated from archaeological sites from all across California, as well as other historical artifacts that they may have collected over time. And since its inauguration, it has endured and grown since. Here's a photo of the museum. It's on N and or O and 10th Street, I believe, right in downtown Sacramento, and it's very close to everything, kind of nestled within the government buildings in Sacramento. So the exhibits that they have a few permanent exhibits right now. One, of course, is the Native peoples and the missions. That's what I'm going to be focusing on, but they also had a brief section on innovations. So that's the gold rush through the Apple computer. They had a old style movie theater that kind of showcased California's presence in Hollywood and how there's this Hollywood kind of gilded image of what it means to live in California. Another exhibit was the internment of American Japanese during World War II, which was a really powerful thing to see. Aside from that, they have a few rotating exhibits, such as I believe they still have something left over from Women's History Month. They also have a new portion going in for the inductees into the California Hall of Fame, but that, of course, hasn't been finished yet. So the Native California exhibit, this is the first exhibit that you walk through on your way throughout the museum. I found it fairly non-cohesive in its organization. I will be going into that a little later. As this is a museum critique, I did find many good things about this exhibit, but it was a mix of kind of both good and bad. There was a lot of focus on the artifacts, which was nice because they're great visual aids. But I found that the substance and written portion of it was either lacking or slightly incorrect. They did have a great oral history aspect, which was really, really excellent and helpful. I wish there was more of it, and I wish it was more of a feature. And they also did have an extensive history of the California missions and also those bells that you see driving down to Gilroy. I believe it's on 5. And I found out that those are the bells that mark the original road from San Diego up to Sonoma, the road that you would take to head to all the missions. So going into the displays, the photo on the right is a picture of a large oval exhibit case that's kind of in the center of this main hallway that they have the Native California exhibit in. And those are actually mission baskets, and the sign thankfully does match what's in the case. It doesn't really go into the history of how and why mission baskets differ from other Native California baskets, but that's probably just me being very particular. The photo on the left is a photo of the entire hallway in which the Native California exhibit spans. It's really beautiful. There's a gorgeous mural on the ceiling of, I believe it's Minerva, and the kind of scene that depicts the state seal. I thought it was comically small, but actually, as I walked through the rest of the museum, it was given more of a larger scene than the rest of the exhibits, which balanced out in the end. So here's some more displays. So this was one of the many basketry displays that I saw. I really did not find this effective. There was no documentation on these baskets, nothing to say what they were. There was a little number that corresponded, and it would tell you which tribe it can be attributed to and its materials, but other than that, there was nothing telling you why you were looking at them. The basket on the right, for example, also was backwards. It's not displayed properly. you can see the last left row, the end is actually facing forward. But this was kind of mind-boggling to me. This, although a great display with some lovely baskets, the sign is very misleading. These are some examples of how I thought the displays, though probably well meant, didn't exactly hit home and had some problems. This says plateau basketry, but then reading the description beneath it, it just talks about the obsidian and says nothing about the baskets, which kind of defeats the purpose. So the underlying connections that I saw throughout this exhibit, there was a big emphasis on Native Californians being the victims of colonization. And the mission history portion was very extensive, and that I had some issues there too, but for the most part, they did talk about the negative effects that it had on the communities and the people who were already living here. It did have a great extensive history that was very detailed on the missions and how they came about, how they were run, who ran them, and lots of details about the different conflicts with the Native Californians throughout between Sonoma and San Diego. And they had a great oral history portion of this too. So this is the oral history screen that was playing below a graph that actually really depicted the population decline and population timeline of when each mission came into existence and the dramatic effects it had on Native California populations. So one thing that I learned from this exhibit is that the Pope, maybe it was Benedict, but one of the recent popes actually inducted Junipero Serra into sainthood, and he was the lovely gentleman who kind of ran the whole California Catholic missions from Spain. And that's a huge issue for Native peoples of California today, having this person who brought devastation, murder, and complete horrifying life change to everyone already living in California has now become a saint. So that's very problematic. And the oral history goes into that and how it's affected each community differently. And of course, there was a portion on Ishi. This was a small portion. It wasn't really, it didn't really take up a lot of space, but we did hear from his fellow tribesmen, and the oral history portion of this was good. I think that it didn't really talk into what he did at UC Berkeley for Kroeber. There was a slightly romanticized spin to that, kind of like he was rescued from being, he was, taken out of captivity. He was in jail, but moved to a different sort of cell, which they didn't really describe. They do have a photo of his family when they did finally get his brain back from the Smithsonian, and they're able to lay him to rest. So that was really excellent. They had one of his fur cape that was found when he was taken by the trappers, which was really interesting. I think the Ishi kind of fell flat for me because I knew probably too much about that history there. There was a portion about cultural appropriation. This was very early in the exhibit, and it was kind of an aside, but here we see artifacts that have used Native American imagery as in popular culture, and they use it here to show that it has kind of been stereotyped and used in a not sensitive way to the people who this is actually depicting. On the wall behind there, you see the picture on the left is a man watching a train pass through his native lands. I believe that might be in Modoc. My memory is failing me there, but the images on the right on the wall are images of before and after photos that they would take in Native American, I guess, colonization schools, where Native people would have to send their children away, while children would be taken away from them, and put in these boarding schools to, I guess, westernize them. And they like to take before and after photos, which was charming. One thing that I really thought was great, because we just learned about this in class, is the shirt on the left in the case was contributed by a Native artist, and it says, "I am not a mascot." And it's kind of one of those resistance pieces of fashion that really counteracts, the crate, the fruit crate next to it with this big Native American headdress on it, or not little, what was his name? Tonto from the TV show, who's a sidekick in a Western. And then I believe that back is the hood ornament of a Buick, I think, but it has this Native American kind of chief head that lights up. So all these images have been taken out of context and used throughout our, Western history without crediting different tribes, and also not caring where they came from. So here's I kind of went over this already about explaining what was in the case in the appropriation. So that was actually most of the exhibit. There was a portion that had an atlatl, and there was a few arrowheads and different stone tools, but they had a model of a pygmy mammoth, which my fiance thought was just so fascinating. Like, yeah, they existed here in California, and they were actually hunted for food. And I showed him the atlatl throwing board and the throwing dart, which, seeing him learn from this exhibit, kind of put everything in perspective for me. That yes, I've been studying this, so I have a different eye looking at it, but having someone with me who has no knowledge and they're actually learning something, it in the end it means that it was effective. Um, so that was the end of the exhibit, but as I walked through the rest of the museum, they had in the women's history portion, they actually had this small case of Native women who were keeping their basketry collection, their basketry traditions alive. And this is the California Indian Basket Weavers Association, and they had a small case, which I thought was just so wonderful, because even though it was outside of the specified Native California exhibit, the museum did have current living traditions represented, and that it has moved out of history and it's in the present, and that was really powerful for me. Of course, being a basketry nerd, I love looking at this and trying to, determine, oh, what's it made of? What kind of basket was it? Is it twined? Is it coiled? I know the one in the front left is a pomo basket, um, but I can go into that for hours. So the takeaway, I think, I think this museum is a little dated. I love the oral history aspect of it. I really wish that there was more of that, and that the signs were a little more accurate and had a little more substance. Because walking through it, you saw a lot of artifacts, and the emphasis was on the artifacts. But I think that we missed a big portion of explanation that went behind the artifacts, and I think that it could be taken in different ways. So that could be improved. But overall, as I said earlier, going with someone who has little knowledge of this period of history in this region, going with him and seeing him learn from it, it means that it was an effective exhibit, which was really nice.